I'm Johnpaul Jones. I'm a 70-year resident of Bainbridge Island, where all of this takes place, and I'm an architect. As a young man, I was always very good at art. It was recognized early that this kid had some talent. In the high school that I went to, they had a drafting class for drawing for do architecture. And it really stimulated my mind about how to do art that people walk through. And that's really what architecture is that it's something that people go through and experience. The light and the place and the view that's captured by the building and all that. So that was what got me started in it. And then later on, I went to architectural school at University of Oregon. But I wanted to go to Berkeley and go to their architectural school. And I probably would have flunked out because it wasn't art, wasn't mixed in very much with it. It was very technical, very good, but very technical. And at Oregon, there was an art school and art history school and architecture school were all in one place, and they worked together and classes and stuff. And that was the right place for me. And so that's kind of what stimulated me was, when I was a young man, had some talents in art, and I'm still very active and do artwork now. But architecture is really an art as far as I'm concerned. I've been a partner in a firm called Jones & Jones. It was just by accident that we all had the same name. We practiced together in Seattle and Pioneer Square for 60 years, and did a lot of work for all kinds of clients like National Park Service and Native communities. And I specialize mainly in doing work for the Native communities here in Seattle and throughout the country. And that's a little bit connected to my heritage, which is I was born in a little place called Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and my mother and grandmother and my grandfather were all Choctaw Indians. And so I grew up in that sort of heritage until I was about 10, and then we moved to California, and things changed. My life changed after that, and but that's what's allowed me to kind of make connections to native work, and so I do a lot of that kind of native work. And our firm in Seattle, we did the first naturalistic zoo project anywhere in the world, right here in Seattle. And that caught on and is all over people do it now all over the world. In fact, we do zoo work all over the world where you take animals and put them in a more natural habitat and mix in a little bit of cultural stuff, human world in with that. And then we do Native American work, and then we do parks and work for the National Park Service. A lot of planning work for them over the years, and then most people know me because of I was the lead architect for 12 years on the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, and along all of that history of doing work is that there were memorials here and there, and I had done a number of them. But they're very difficult to do because they're usually around some pretty emotional things that are hard to how do you express that in a memorial and a physical design. That's something that's as tragic as what this is about. So I tried to avoid doing unless I get pushed into it by the client. And I wanted to tell a little story about Frank Kitamoto, who was a real kind of leader of this group way back when we first started many, many years ago. And Frank called me up and said, he said, Johnpaul, would you, because he was my dentist and my kid's dentist, and he said, would you come down to make a little presentation to our board what we're doing about some of your memorials work? And so I went to his office, and there was like about 7 or 8 people there, and I made a presentation, and then everybody thanked me and all that, and so I went away. And I thought, okay, that's over with, because and Frank called me up 2 weeks later, and he said, well, you got the job. And I said, Frank, what do you mean I got the job? What job are you talking about? And so we had a big laugh about it, and it was it was this project. It's kind of a wonderful, a lot of times you have to go through many steps to be able to win a job, and this one was pretty straightforward. And people said, we want you live here on the island. And I used to live right up New Sweden and bring my kids down here to go swimming. And I would walk right through here. I didn't know anything about it. What had happened here, had no idea about that at all. And it wasn't until later that I learned, the real story and what the place was like. And it was kind of a soft way of getting into a project. It wasn't like, we got this much money, we need to do this, and that's it. And it was it really started with kind of discovering all the past things that had happened. And so one more little story about that. It was a meeting where I said, after I got the job, I said, well, let's all get together. And we met at the community space of the St. Barnabas Church. And there was like about 10 or 12 of members of the Japanese community, and there was about 10 or 12 of interested citizens. And there was various organizations of church groups were leading the discussion. But the national park had been there, and they'd been active for a long, long time. And so everybody got up and talked, but nobody in the Japanese community said anything. When we were there for like about an hour and a half trying to learn about this, what to do, what are we going to here for, and what's behind this, what are the thoughts behind it. And so after it was all done, I told everybody, I said, we're going to have another meeting in a couple of weeks, and only the Japanese community on Bainbridge can come. That's it. And that really upset the National Park Service and everybody, because they all wanted to be part of it, but I wasn't getting enough from the other side of what it was all about. So we had the next meeting 2 weeks later, and we allowed a representative to come from that group, the non-Japanese group, and but there was probably 10 or 12 members there, and it took a while to get going, but once we got going, it was amazing what we learned, and those items and those thoughts that came about in that discussion if what we've used and still use all the way through on this. Frank put forward his first item, which was that this is not a feel-good place. He said, don't forget that. This was very difficult. It was very difficult for the people here to have to give up everything and leave. And so we want people to understand about it, but we don't want them to think it's a positive thing that we're doing this. That all of this contributes to them understanding how difficult it was, and that was our feelings, our emotions were part of that. So he wanted that expressed in the design. And that led to all kinds of discussions about how do you do that? What do you put here to allow that to happen? To kind of affect the emotions of, you get a little bit of an experience of what the people felt in the process of having to give everything up and leave and not knowing where they were going. Talk about the overall design. That's an important thing to, why isn't it just a straight wall? The national park had done a lot of research, and I had read a lot about the Japanese community on Bainbridge. And before Pearl Harbor, their life was moving along in a really wonderful way. They had been able to create a better life for their kids, and they were becoming owners of businesses, and they were going to college, and so their life was what I call this sinuous thing that was curving like this and going forward. And so that's why the whole thing is set up and has that quality to it. That was their life. But then at the far end, you can see it's broken. Okay, that's Pearl Harbor. That's the whole thing right there. That just happened like that. And so that's the important thing now. When we were talking with who were here, everybody was quiet. It was pretty quiet. They remember walking down, and they were walking on a gravel road, and it was so quiet that that's what they heard, was the gravel of people walking. So we thought that would be appropriate, instead of having paved, that it really was, you walk along and you might not even know that, but you subconsciously because usually people are pretty quiet when they walk through. They will hear their feet on us. So that was an important thing. I did a number of alternatives for what the wall might be like in terms of the actual physical design, and we had some that were a living wall, and we had some that were stone all the way up, and some that were all the way wood and all that. And the group got together and decided what they thought best represented for this location. I had studied, because I was doing some buildings at the University of Washington, and I had found some books on Japanese farm structures. They're magnificent, beautiful things with their walls, stone walls, and woodwork and all that. And Frank had said pretty clearly to the woodworker group that was come, and everybody, is that don't do a temple. We don't want to do a temple, but we want you to be respective of how we worked with materials, natural materials. So wood was one and stone was one, and so that's why we kept it simple, just basically to that. And so you'll see some of in the overhangs of the wall, you'll see the detailed articulation of the wood, how it has a relationship to those structures that were built, not the temples, but the kind of the daily life structures that were built in Japan. That some of that was happening here. I got to tell another story. When my kids were really young, and I had to drive them to play with some friends up by what they call Battle Point, that neighborhood. And when I was driving around there, where Frank's family property is, that there's all trees now, but there were no trees. There was all an old strawberry farm, and so there was very few plants growing any trees. It was all open, and there was this little farm structure out in the middle of the field, and it was not a Scandinavian structure, a 45-degree roof like this. It was a very one that was spread out like this, and it had all these. It was just like those images that I had been looking at in the Japanese farm structures, and I almost ran off the road because it just caught my attention as an architect. And so I kind of knew some of the things that heritage of working with natural materials it comes with the people, just like any people that from a certain area and it was one that we tried to kind of use rather than say we're designing a temple. We'll take that heritage of architecture, of building, and put that in. John Baudet and the timber framers were very helpful in working with us on how to get this kind of cedar. And this is actually a mixture of western red cedar, which is local here, and yellow cedar, which comes from up north. In the process of doing it, we built models that were, we built a full size, you could stand next to model of this wall, and everybody, we had, I said, you know, I'm tall, I'm 6'4", and most of the Japanese community is a lot shorter than, so I was afraid I would get the scale off. And so we built full-scale models so they could come in the meeting that we had and stand next to it and talk about it. And so there was a lot of participation that way to kind of make the design be more, not just in the kind of the exhibits and the things that you have here that really say Japanese, but it's the whole scale was trying to be that way. So there was a meeting, and we were all together, and Mary Woodward, who was the daughter of the Bainbridge Review folks that were very important in this whole thing, she came to the meeting and was been pretty active, and she had a little bell, and she said, you know, and she had some origamis, and she said, we need to do something that allows the community to be able to honor the spirit of the people this way. And sometimes if you could build something or attach something that we can hang on, that would be really good. And she held the little bell up and she went ding, ding, and it was like the spirit of the wind blowing that would have been, it just was phenomenal. That was really, those are the kind of emotional, spiritual things we were looking for in the design. So this little thing that all the for the origamis on it came from that discussion. How can you allow, there was three things we tried to do. How can you allow people to leave things? So that's why we extended, right below the wood, we extended that shelf out, and people leave a lot of different things on that. And that's why you see these little, in the stone down below, those shelves come out, and that's for the same thing. And if you look at the pictures, you really study, because I really looked at all the pictures very carefully. There was a picture of Frank, and he was like about this big, and he was all dressed up really nicely. He was holding a little tractor, and we thought, that's really important to allow for people to bring things that means something to that family. So that's what those came from. And then the other one is that how do you help the visitor who knows nothing about this and learn the first time that these were how do you convey that these were real people? They were neighbors. They were they were people that lived in the community. And so that was the important thing, is that how do we get the names, number one. And number two, ages, was really good to do the ages. And the other one is the in families and all that sort of stuff. Because when you walk along the wall and you see those names and you see the ages, you start to say, these were real people. Because when they get down to the very end and they started to go out to get on the boats, that's where they changed to numbers. They were only numbers from that point on. So now that was really interesting to me, because in the native community that I came from, the Choctaw, we were moved out of the South into Oklahoma. And when they were registering all of us, they said, "What's your name?" So my descendants had to say what their name was, and they said, "Okay, your name Peter," and you were and that happened here in the Northwest too, to the native people here too, and so you kind of started losing your identity, and that was really part of the whole thing. And that was there was kind of you want your visitors that are coming through to kind of catch those things. Sometimes they'll miss it, And the visitor center and the docents will be able to help them understand that better at the visitor center when that's built. So that native heritage and the tragedy that happened is something that made me really relate to this quite a bit. You know, where you had to give up everything, and you had to go somewhere else and start all over again. And there's some other little side things that just between us. The national park had done a great study of all this area, what it was like, the farm next door and the dance hall up there, and where the parking was, and the road that went down, because there was no Eagle Harbor Drive out here. You came down Taylor, and you had to come in back on what's called Old Mill Road, and come along and come down this way, and that's how you got to the Eagledale Dock down here. And that is something to kind of learn about on this project. Is that, why did they do it here? Why didn't they load on the other side? And it was a place where they wanted to make it kind of out of the way. They didn't know how the non-Japanese people were going to react, and this was a way to be kind of out of the main. So when you look at the photos of people standing around, you'll see a lot of non-Japanese, and they were friends that had come to say goodbye. And some were out on rowboats, and some were here. So it's just, you learn about the community, and it wasn't all like get rid of those people. It was real. There was a big portion of people here that really said this is not right to do it, but they weren't like nowadays where they have a lot of protests going on, and that just didn't happen very much. So I did a project over in the mountains for a old-time family in Seattle called the Bullitt family. Harriet Bullitt was my client, and because she had told me that there was a Japanese family that lived with her that took care of everybody, the gardens, and cooked and did all that. And she said when she was little, she said that one day they were all gone. And she never knew what happened to them until she saw that book about this internment, and then she realized that they had been taken away on all that. And so it was to me that was an eye-opener, because it was sort of like me living here. I didn't know any of this, so this is a way that people are reminded that we don't ever want to do this, have this ever happen again, And so it's good to have a visitor center so people can share publications and learn more about this. So. And I got a call one day that I thought it was a friend joking me. He said, "This is President Obama. We want a representative of him, and we want to talk to you." And I thought, "Oh yeah, right." So and then I got a letter that says I put it in a pile. I paid no attention to it, and then my wife said, once I told her about it a couple of weeks later, she said, "You better take a look at this and see what this means." And I was chosen as one of, I think, 10 people that received the National Medal from about humanities, and it's a big medal. And I had to go to Washington D.C. and President Obama puts it on. But I was sitting in the second. They had all the people that were getting awards lined up, and they had a seat you had to sit in, and I was in the third seat over from the edge, and the first seat said Michelle Obama, and then there was a lady that was a poet, and then me. And so I came in early, and I sat down. My wife was sitting right in back of me, and she walked in and she said, "Hello, Johnpaul. It's good to meet you." And I never met her before. She's, president's wife and busy. I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was so shook up on the whole thing. But what it was is that they make the decision of the number of people that have been submitted, who's going to get the award from their point of view and all that. And so both of them, it's not just the president, but both of them make the decision, and then it's carried out by the staff of everybody. So Barack Obama was terrific, a wonderful person. His wife was terrific and a wonderful person, and so that was a real honor to. And by the way, we just finished the design of a small visitor center that'll be built up here, and they're going to get the permit. So next spring they'll be building the visitor center, and that's the last piece of the whole project. And so and they'll come back.
And you designed that?
Huh?
You designed that?
Yeah.
Yep.
With people like to say, "Well, you designed this." Well, we did it together. The committee, the Japanese community, we all work together on it. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Sometimes there's nobody here, National Park, nobody's here to kind of help, and you walk along and people are saying, well, I wonder what that means. And I say, well, let me tell you. So that's kind of a docent, free docent thing.
The question we get asked a lot are, there's breaks in the...
It's letting the natural world filter through. But we wanted the air and the visual quality of things to come through. And did anybody remember the Columbus Day storm back in the 60s? There was 150-mile-an-hour winds hit here. I was in college at that time in Eugene. And, it'll come again. And this will allow structurally, technically, having those breaks will allow for technically for the thing to let air through instead of being totally resistant, even though it'll hold up to it. I'll just tell you, it was going to go all the way out about 200 to 300 feet to give you the feeling of you're leaving. You're leaving. And but to get the permits to go out over the water and go down on it would have taken 10 years to do it. So we decided to do just a short deck, and that's called a departure deck. And the thing that happens right there at the start of that is when these people stop being called what their names are here, they became a number at that point. And all the internment camps that they were in, they were just numbers. They knew each other's names, but they were a number, and that was part of the government's effort to kind of control it. And it's hard to imagine, but they went out got on their boat. They didn't know where they were going, and it's like you, Carol, has no name. You're number 900 and something. That's why you look at the medal. The artist did a good job. You'll see, if you look at it closely, it'll look like tags, right? Because that's what everybody had a tag. And then they walked through the gravel road and went down and got on the dock, and then went down and got on the old Eagle Harbor dock and got on the ferry boat and went into Seattle. When they got into Seattle, they were put on a train, and a guy that worked for me, Kazuto Makami was his name, and he was a young man at that time, and he looked down, and he was on the overpass. After you get off the ferry boat, the new overpass they're making across the highway, he was up there, and him and his mom were looking down, and they were watching the Bainbridge community being loaded in the train goes, and they said, "Isn't that sad?" And then only a couple of weeks later, they got a notice that said they have 2 weeks to leave. And so Bainbridge was the test for the whole country. The government didn't know how the non-Japanese community was going to react, or how the Japanese community was going to react, or anything. So this was the test place that they did it at, was here. It was about my past projects with Native community and this project that helps in helping people understand their community, their environment, and where they live, and all that sort of stuff. And it's a Choctaw thing that my grandmother said, when you get older and you go off to do things, and they pounded this into me. They said, whatever you design has to be responsive to the natural world, and there's a list of things that go with that. The animal world, and the spirit world, and then human world. And those things are applied in all of this, and all the work I do that I've done in the past 60 years. So.